Timothy Frog here, and Jay's Manchild has asked if I can introduce his Muppet March Madness videos.
Here then is a collection of video games starring Jim Henson's greatest work, The Muppets. Although Storyteller was pretty good, wasn't it? But anyway, yes, have a look at this, and we'll see you at the end. Thanks.
I'm not in the first game. Is that right? Wait, who is? Piggy? Okay. Well, without further ado, sorry, frog in my throat. Ladies and gentlemen, Pigs in Space!
I once knew someone who didn't like the Muppets. Yes, I know. Who could hate the Muppets? It's up there with disliking Labradors and ice cream. I believe his main objection was their creepiness, because they were treated as they were just normal people by the humans that they interacted with. But this to me was their greatest strength. They weren't just seen as puppets. You started to believe that they were complex beings rendered from felt, and not just a snazzy-limbed glove being fisted by Frank Oz. And it's my love of Kermit, Piggy, Fozzie, Gonzo and their absolute horde of crazy marionettes that has spurred me to set aside the usual schedule of TV games, weird licenses and movie titles to something that incorporates all things Muppety for March Muppet Madness. I'm not going to go into reams of detail on Jim Henson's rise of the Muppet Company or anything like that. I'll just give you a bit of relevant information, go straight into the Muppety action. As there are so many plain old Muppets games, I also won't be needing to wander off piste to head to Sesame Street, into the Labyrinth, or jetting off to see Yoda in Dagobah. No, not this year anyway. You're just going to see pure Muppets across multiple generations and formats. And these games won't be curated in any way. Why no? In the spirit of Muppet chaos, I'll be playing these games without finding out if they're any good or not first. You'll see a selection of these games, and I'll come back to it, probably, in March Muppet Madness 2025. First up, chronologically, apparently the first Muppets title, which to give it its full title is Pigs in Space starring Miss Piggy. But you and I will know it better as this. Pigs in Space! Pigs in Space was a recurring sketch from the Muppet Show. It was a parody of 60s science fiction television, a pig-dominated story that took the crew of the Swine Trek, those being First Mate Piggy, Dr. Julius Strangepork, and the dashing Captain Link Hogthrob, as they embark on all sorts of comedic spacebound adventures. It was popular enough to make 32 appearances during the Muppet Show run, with the crew mocking a lot of tropes of the genre and even having a few special guests of the non-porcine variety show up. People like John Cleese and Mark Hamill, but as Luke Skywalker. Atari published and developed Pigs in Space starring Miss Piggy for release in 1983 for their Atari 2600 console. In the game, you've got 3 different stages based on the 3 different principal characters. If you pick Captain Hogthrob, you'll be playing Chicken Invaders. The story of this is that while you're exploring the planet Cluck, poor old Link was set upon by chickens. The clue was in the name, Captain. Come on, man. His role in all this chicken rum-doo is to vanquish the hens before they make their way to the planet. He does this by firing sausages at them and... What? Sausages? A pig is using sausages to defend itself. Well, this has taken a dark turn. The chickens will defend themselves by dropping eggs. It's a war of cooked breakfast, with each side sacrificing family members and family members yet to be to win out over their rival then. The most inglorious of battles. If an egg hits Captain Link, he will become a chicken, and more importantly, he will lose a life. To make matters worse, the chickens are being supervised by that goofy oddball Gonzo in a UFO. Well, it's his head on a sort of UFO shape. Anyway, you can hit him and blast him and get bonus points and also stop the annoying noise he makes, which is brilliant. As you can tell, As if the Chicken Invaders title wasn't clue enough, it is very much a Space Invaders clone. Gameplay wise, it's very, very Space Invaders, only you're a pig with a laser finger, apparently. Link blasts away as the chickens descend. As they near our intrepid captain, he shrinks downwards as if ashamed by their clucking beauty. Gonzo's head is tricky to hit, but as soon as you clock how fast your bullets move, you should be taking on both him and his chicken hordes, and you'll find it all very straightforward. Chicken Invaders. Good simplistic Atari 2600 fun. I can't really say much more about it. That is literally all it is. If you select the star of the show, First Mate Piggy, well, she has managed to find herself ejected from the swine trek during a rather voracious pasta storm in the game Pasteroids. Now, as I'm sure you'll be able to tell, this does not look like asteroids. This is in fact sort of more of a primitive version of Frogger. Obviously, this is an appalling situation for a pig to be in, and so Miss Piggy must do all she can to board the ship and not get left behind. She must dodge the Italian dinner stuffs, but if they get too close, she can give them one of her patented karate chops for bonus points. The important thing is, though, is that Piggy must get on that ship and make good her porky escape. The first level of difficulty on this game is as difficult as eating a bacon sandwich. You can easily cut a dash through the bolognese pretty easily, as it's sparse and indeed slow. But a few levels in, when the escape ship and spaghetti start speeding up, that's where it gets a little bit hairy and a little bit more difficult. It can get very frustrating to get to that craft, each hit from an errant pasta strand sending you further down the screen, and before you know it, you're a porcine Sandra Bullock, alone and terrified in the infinite nothing of space. But overall, this bit's a bit so-so. In the last part, you'll be in the trotters of Dr. Strangepork, and well, he's in a spot of bother in Escape from the Planet of the Gonzoids. The swine trek has gotten trapped in an abandoned pizza mine, still being guarded by robotic gonzoids created by Gonzo. The gonzoids are parked out on the edges of the mine, yeeting pizzas across the mine, which will damage the swine trek. You'll be defending yourself with the ship's boomerang. The boomerang is a cannon that launches upwards and then sort of goes a bit to the side to swat Gonzo's minions. But these rays, as well as Gonzo's pizza and the cabin walls, will cause damage to your ship's hull and leave your porker crew gasping for air. You probably won't do too well in your first attempt at this particular stage. Manoeuvring the swine trek is easy enough. It's just lining up the rather puny boomerang. Well, that's just a bit finicky at first. It's all like spitting in the wind, this blaster. Despite the looks, the levels aren't procedurally generated, so there's a definite advantage in knowing where the gonzoids are in these vertically scrolling caverns. If you miss hitting one in a narrow passageway, your goose is well and truly cooked, as the gonzoids in the narrow passages, they will mash fire relentlessly. This section is the most flawed, but also probably the most rewarding and fun. Typically for Atari 2600 games, these are a score chase affair. The levels just keep going until you run out of lives. Just like space is infinite. For me, Pigs in Space isn't the best you'll find on the system, but it's not the worst either. It's not awful. I was quite happy playing it, which isn't always the case with games of this vintage. The game was reviewed in January 1984 in the laziest possible title for a magazine ever, that being Electronic Fun with Computers and Games. They gave it a 75% and said, "Talk about making a silk cartridge out of a sow's ear." Atari and Jim Henson have pooled their not inconsiderable talents to come up with a VCS cartridge that not only lampoons some of the most familiar space scenarios by using the famed Muppet Show characters, but actually offers a top-notch challenge to novices and experts alike.
We have Carnival of Chaos! That sounds pretty ominous. Good luck.
After taking to the vast void of space with some fabric skin porkers in last week's episode, we're slammed back to Earth and the knifey fear of the Carnival. It's not easy being a Muppet, is it? All these problems alongside trying to run a theatre show, all while being violated by strange men and women in flares. Chaos at the Carnival was supposed to be the first instalment in a multi-format series called Jim Henson's Muppet Adventures, but it ended up being the only one, largely down to it being a poor performer from a commercial and critical point of view. Hang your head in shame, Frog. Incidentally, what is this Kermit? Does it inflate when Piggy sits on your lap? The game came out on 4 platforms, the Commodore 64, Apple II and MS-DOS in 1989, with the Nintendo Entertainment System version following in 1990. These were published by High-Tech Expressions, a company who's published a number of licensed video games ranging from Barbie to Tom and Jerry and the Beethoven movie franchise. I'm sure I'll come back to them at some point in the future then. The computer and NES versions are quite different, which is explained by the fact that they were programmed by 2 entirely different companies. Micro Mosaics did the original computer versions, while coding duties for the NES version were handled by Mind's Eye. Micro Mosaics had done a fair few licensed games of their own. Henson's stablemate Sesame Street had an edutainment title from them, and they put out a couple of Star Trek titles too. The strangest license they did, and definitely one I'm going to have to cover at some point, is The Honeymooners, which was a very popular 1950s US sitcom. Micro Mosaics closed their doors after making this Muppet game and a Funhouse adaptation, which isn't the same game as the NES one I covered in the Games Based on TV Show series. The NES version was coded by Mind's Eye Technology, who I can't actually find a lot more about. It looks like they birthed some felt babies onto the NES via this game and then just pieced out. Make up your own history for Mind's Eye Technology here. I'll pretend they make coats for cold wasps these days. The storyline for Jim Henson's Muppet Adventure #1, Chaos at the Carnival. God, that's a long name. Anyway, yes, the storyline is that it's a damsel in distress story. Of course it is, the 1980s. All quests are damsel in distress stories. And in this case, it's that blonde-haired porker, Miss Piggy. The Muppets crew are searching for her in the chaotic carnival of calamitous confusion, where she has been snared by the villainous Dr. Grump. I'm not sure to what end. There's no deep lore presented to Dr. Grump's motivations beyond that he is sinister and not very polite. The only way to get Piggy back is to beat the Grump by braving a variety of funfair attractions, all of which would struggle to attain their safety credentials should a relevant health and safety inspector come and pay them a visit. We've got a Tunnel of Love, Duck Hunt, the Space Ride, the Funhouse, bumper cars, and then a battle with Dr. Grump's pet Grumposaurus. In the computer game version at least, we shall cover that one first, as the NES one is radically different in its execution. The first thing to say about Carnival of Chaos is, oh my word, is it a butt-ugly game for 1989. This was the same year that the Commodore 64 was abundant with machine-pushing games such as Batman the Movie, Shadow the Beast and Stunt Car Racer. The extremely limited colours, was there 4 on the screen at once, and representations of the characters are hideous, with Fozzie looking like a snowman sculpted from a white dog turd, and Scooter looking like a deformed Chris Evans from The Big Breakfast, not the Captain America one. I should explain now that I was unable to get an Apple II version working, so if you wanted to see that version, you'll have to give me a Miss Piggy chop round the face, because I've failed you. The first level, or attraction, we're going to look at is the Funhouse. In all the versions, NES included, you can tackle any of these stages in any order. You lucky people. In the computer versions, you'll then select which character you want to tackle the challenges with. The characters don't play any differently, they are just an aesthetic choice, and what an aesthetic choice it is. And in the Commodore 64 version of the Funhouse level, you don't actually see the character at any point at all. How utterly pointless. The computer versions you see, all of their mini-games play slightly differently. There's a visual theme to it all, but yes, the levels are different. In the MS-DOS version, you explore a vast, partitioned maze in the hope of finding keys, and the Commodore 64 version, well, that gets what on the surface looks like a sliding puzzle game. What a rollicking start for the Commodore. In truth, it's not even a sliding puzzle game, but a rearranged the bits of the picture to complete what is a bit of artwork of Fozzie dissecting Miss Piggy with a saw. It gives you plenty of time, it really isn't difficult. The Commodore 64 version then is off to a bad start. Much more difficult is the DOS one, as the maze is quite large and never changes from its vertical design, all while you're being hunted by husky heads and a goon who's lost his way from the bumper car enclosure. So with that in mind, let's do the bumper car enclosure next. And there's our man again, in the right place and challenging one of our crew to a race around a looped version of the Dodgems course. Miss Piggy will occasionally appear, making light of her capture. I mean, come on, Porky Git, get out the car and let's start pegging it away from this Dr. Grump. Stop titting about. Obstacles are scattered around that will stop you and your opponent from finishing the race. They seem to generate at random, though. The Commodore 64 one has you trying to navigate alone around a single screened twisty course, also full of obstacles, both controlled terribly, and neither the DOS version or the Commodore 64 version is allowed to even consider itself to be mentioned in the same sentence as fun. Next, the duck hunt. The aim of both of these is the same: take down a load of waterfowl with a supply of tomatoes. In the Commodore 64 version, they're flying in formation, possibly for the winter, whereas the PC version has them all riled up and tearing towards you at a great rate of knots. They're not messing around, these ducks, and nor should they. These tomatoes must be loaded with bicarbonate of soda, as in both versions the ducks explode in the most gory manner possible. There's not a lot to these games, so there's not really a lot to criticise about them. It's sort of very reaction based as you take down the ducks with your tomatoes. So let's just move on to the next bit. In Space Ride, your Muppet will be steering around a ringed planet in an unusual shaped craft that just so happens to be the same shape as some of the objects on the planet's outermost ring. Well, this looks like it's going to be pretty straightforward then. What I'll do is I'll just line up my ship with the other shape and, nothing happens. It's all done in sort of inertia style control, so maybe I didn't quite line it up. No, nothing's happening. The DOS version even has the planet moving up and down and like a meteorite coming at you. And I can't get this bloody thing to work. How on earth do you do this? Oh, wait. The idea is that you line up the ship not with the other shape, but go slightly above it and then thrust it downwards into the hole at the top. It took me so long. I pressed so many buttons on the keyboard and finally I did it, and it was the most easy and simple, unchallenging task. And well, that's it. There's nothing more to say about that one. The final attraction before the big showdown is a river-based effort where your Muppet of choice has to zip between the trash, hippo heads and crocodiles that fill the water of this river. I'm sure using your eyes you can work out what's going on here, and really I don't really need to explain it any more than that. It's another simple game. Get all the keys and you're all set for the final showdown for Kermit against the Grumposaurus. And then you get to bring home the bacon. Sorry, Piggy. The idea is that you need to jump at the beast and tickle him with a feather. The PC version is especially sloppy in its control, whereas the C64 version, that's deathly slow. You have to jump and hit him in exactly the right place to tickle him, and it's the worst part of the game, yes, including the sliding puzzle bit. The whole game, every single event, either feels broken, unfinished, underdeveloped, and, well, I doubt I'll play a worse Muppets game. We shall see, I guess. A year later, and the Muppets rocked up in the entirely redesigned conversion for the NES. And, well, it's clearly had a lot more attention paid to it in its presentation than its computer game equivalents. The sprites are colourful and recognisable, and though we've lost the Duck Hunt game, The rest of the rounds are here, all swanked up to the nines. Well, compared to before anyway. And it's not as if NES owners need another Duck Hunt game, do they? This time, there's no selecting of which Muppet you play as. Each character of the 4 that we get here gets their own sequence. Amazing Maze puts Fozzie Bear in a series of 25 different coloured labyrinths made from Muppet-sized Knickerbocker glories. Yes, very bizarre. There are a few malicious beasts patrolling, from skating short people to killer candy canes, a rogue ice cream, and the Grumposaurus towards the end of your adventure. Fozzie's role in this is to go and find loads of bows and boxes in these single-screened Bomberman-style mazes, and after a few of these are swagged up, it's on to the next stage. There are a few power-ups scattered. I can't tell what they are, or in fact what most of them do, but Fozzie can pick them up and throw them about, and occasionally he'll hit his opponents and freeze them to the spot. But these power-ups won't matter, as these stages are very simple indeed, due to the AI being as dumb as a bag of Gonzo's chickens. You'll get through them no problem. They are very boring though. Kermit tries his own version of Tubin next, as you row merrily down a river filled with life-draining Umskar. There's some situations in this bit that feel unpassable without taking some damage, but I suspect you won't have much trouble finishing it. It's mercifully shorter than Fozzie's level. It's Animal's turn to steal a bumper car now, as he careens along a road, seemingly unaware that that's not how bumper cars work. He has to dodge bombs and other obstructions while battling against some very slippery controls. Another level that feels overlong and tiresome, but as there's so few levels, maybe it's a bit of artificial padding, eh? Gonzo has the most creative level, but it's also by far the hardest. What starts as an asteroid-style shoot-'em-up with very similar controls soon becomes a horizontally scrolling shoot-'em-up akin to R-Type or Gradius, but with those asteroid controls. Do these style controls work in a horizontal shooter with cavern walls? No, not really, but I admire the effort. The walls don't do damage to Gonzo's craft, but you'll be bouncing off them a lot. No doubt into enemies, comets, and the bullets of turrets. Now, these turrets are a particular menace, and they will pin you down and they will shoot your craft until Gonzo has bullets in his nose and he dies. This level is nastily tricky, will hold you up from finishing the game, but it's one of the few that you want to return to, and it's by far the best level in either game. The final level once again has Kermit and, this time his feather, taking on the Grumposaurus, with the aim of tickling the Grumposaurus into submission. Very kinky. But first, and unlike the computer versions, there's a clunky platform section. Once you've felled him, you have to dodge Dr. Grump's bombs and then grab the hearts that Piggy sends out, so you can then go off together and make some frogs porn. I don't apologise for that joke. This level, not so great. The NES game then is by far the better of the two, and well, that's just damning it with faint praise, I'm afraid. It's still not great or even any good. It's average. Put it this way, if Statler and Waldorf started hurling abuse at it, I wouldn't tell them to stop turning up every week if they don't enjoy what's going on. Go and watch the telly, you old farts. I did have a dig around for reviews of either the computer or the NES version from 1989 or 1990 and failed, which means my day is done early and I can go whacker off while looking at pictures of Janice. I mean, go and live a productive and totally non-sexually deviant rest of my day.
This week, The Muppet Show on the Game Boy Color. Hey, that sounds familiar. I think I was on that show.
We're back then with more tales of hand-operated hijinks in the digital world then. We've had them fight in the present day on Earth in chaos at the Carnival. They've taken to the cosmos in Pigs in Space. But now it's time for Kermit and his lovable crew of Muppet misfits to travel through time itself. Now, this game was released by Take-Two and programmed by Tarantula Studios, whose Evel Knievel game we covered not so long ago. But also, they had a hand in at least one game that you've played, as they're now Rockstar Lincoln. The story of Jim Henson's The Muppets has the eponymous crew turn up to one of their productions, only for the hapless buffoons Bunsen and Beaker, those troublesome scientists, to somehow foul up big style and hurl some of the show's most beloved characters back to key moments in history. Well, I mean, the usual eras these games usually take us to anyway. We won't see a sombre traipse from Fozzie Bear around Auschwitz, or a dust-covered frightened Sam the Legal Eagle clearing rubble in the hope of finding some survivors in 9/11. They just wouldn't fit a Muppets game, especially as this one came out before 9/11. But never mind. No, sir, we get 6 time periods to saunter through. The Swedish chef is stuck in prehistory. Miss Piggy finds herself ensconced in a giant Egyptian pyramid. Fozzie Bear is up to his gonads in trouble, cornered by the ancient Romans of 50 AD. Rolf has his work cut out trying to stop himself getting sacrificed at an altar by the Amazonian Aztecs. Gonzo has found himself in a bit of a predicament in medieval England, while Sam the Legal Eagle suddenly finds himself in the lawless times of the Wild West. Not a place for a lawyer, one would suspect. The only 2 Muppets who were due into work that day, Kermit and Animal the drummer, find themselves responsible for rescuing their pals. So they divvy up responsibility between them and then jump into Professor Bunsen's time machine. Kermit goes off to rescue Piggy, Rolf and Sam, while Animal has to rescue his fellow weirdo outsiders, the Swedish chef Gonzo and Fozzie, in this multi-stage platform adventure, all while Statler and Waldorf watch on and quip about their successes and lack thereof. How they're able to view this pan-time spectacle from their box seat is never really made clear. Perhaps this was all actually a stage play, or they're viewing it in some sort of time television. Or my theory is that they've actually died and they're viewing this from the afterlife. R.I.P. Statler and Waldorf, you're with Da Angles and Jade and Lady Di and Captain Tom now, and all the XL bullies. If you're wondering why drumming Rage Case Animal and not, say, Fozzie or Gonzo is the only playable character other than frontman Kermit, well, it's because in the 90s and the 2000s, for some reason, Animal was super popular. He had a huge marketing push, and, well, I mean, he does look a lot cooler than Pepe. They keep putting Pepe front and centre. No one likes Pepe. Stop trying to make Pepe happen, Jim Henson Productions. Kermit and Animal have their own unique abilities, not that you can select them for levels they're not designated to. Kermit throws paper aeroplanes at the historical enemies, while Animal flings his drumsticks around like he's Tommy Lee hearing the words, "I've watched Pamela Anderson's sex tape with you in it, you've got a big winkle." Kermit also has the special ability to do an evasive super high jump, whereas Animal does a screen clearing super stomp. Both your regular attacks and your special abilities have energy bars that can be topped up, with a fair few power-ups that line the battlefield. And you'll also have to pick up fruit and other foodstuffs to keep up your health, which is depicted here by this sinking visage. There are bosses to battle at the end of each stage, including this chubby fella in the cowboy level.
That's racist!
So let's start with the good, because that's what Kermit would have wanted from us. The game is huge for a handheld platformer. Each time period has 4 stages, with each, especially the Mayan/Aztec level, being sprawling adventures as our heroic pair try to locate 3 time period relevant MacGuffins before tackling the boss stage. The boss stage is the place where they're keeping your friends, the furry fellas themselves, captive. If you know what you're doing and you're pretty good at it, the game will still take you at least 4 to 6 hours to finish. Now that doesn't sound hugely long for a game in the 2020s, but it is a big one for a Gameboy title, make no mistake about that. The graphics are okayish, they're not Happy Hippo, but it's varied in its settings and its enemy types. Animation is quite fun, I guess, and there's also some voiced sound clips provided by the cast of the actual real Muppet Show, like good old Frank Oz. Hey, waka, waka, waka! Which leaves us quite a lot of room for the bad, and unfortunately, there's quite a bit of bad. The music is absolutely atrocious, with not even a hint of a Muppets theme or Menomina. All you get is this dirge. Enemies are absolute bullet sponges, which isn't great when you consider that the ammunition of your planes and sticks is quite limited, regardless of the amount of power-ups that are available. I mean, it wouldn't be as big a problem if you could just sort of jump over your enemies and then find more power-ups. But the issue is that the villains that are your height or larger, well, when you jump them, you can't actually clear them. Your life will drain. You can't jump over the enemies in this platform game. This isn't an issue I've ever seen in any platformer other than this. It seems like a pretty big design flaw. Not only that, but there's no invincibility frames, meaning your life just drains while you're in the vicinity of a goon. The Muppets also sustain fall damage very easily, not even being able to fall more than the length of their own bodies without sustaining some damage. I mean, that's realistic, I guess, but realism is not really required in a game about time-travelling Muppets, is it? I mean, most of the time, Muppets don't even have legs. How can they hurt? Flames burn up the Muppets instantly too, obviously, as Muppets are going to be flammable, aren't they? But it's not great when lives are at such a premium and there are a number of blind faith jumps scattered around each stage. As a result of all these play-hurting missteps by the design team, the game is very frustrating, and combined with the huge length of it, it's going to be a bit too daunting for most players. Especially as, worst of all, the game is pretty boring to play. And I don't know, there seems to be something here that just seems unfinished. Looking at the rescue characters, they put in the work in doing a lot of animation for them. However, they're never selectable characters, and that would have helped the game greatly if you could mix it up by playing the characters that you'd rescued from the different time periods. It just feels really unfinished, like they rushed it to meet a deadline and not had time to tighten up the difficulty and the nagging issues. As a performance, I'd be right with Statler and Waldorf by calling this game a big old arse candle. In April 2000, IGN weren't fans at all. They gave it a 2 out of 10 and said the control sucks, the graphics are sloppy, the music is digipop garbage not at all related to the Muppets, the action is tedious, the enemies follow patterns and have no intelligence, and aside from the cutscenes, there's nothing Muppety about this game. The June 2000 issue of CMVG gave it a 2 out of 5 and put it to you that the Muppets are cool, but video games have yet to do them proud, and this attempt doesn't even come close. The action is repetitive and the characters move along too clumsily. Lots to keep you busy, but you'll get bored long before you reach the end. So
this week, Muppets Racemania! I don't know, this one sounds really dangerous. I'm not sure about this one.
Super Mario Kart has a lot to answer for. Nintendo took the skeleton of a 2-player F-Zero sequel and filled it with the denizens of the Mushroom Kingdom, starting the biggest selling spin-off franchise in gaming history. But with it, they condemned us all. While the kart racer has had its successes, Crash Bandicoot, Diddy Kong and Mario's old Olympic running mate Sonic T. Hedgehog fronting perhaps being the cream of the oil-smelling crop, it has also had a great deal of mediocre also-rans and turgid atrocities as well, that are usually fronted by some gurning mascot from another series, movie or TV show. I give you Pac-Man, Konami, Atari, Bomberman, DreamWorks, Nicktoons, The Smurfs, Garfield, Looney Tunes, Madagascar, even M&M Sweets have all had a kart game, and I'm only scratching the surface here. Perhaps then, a Muppet kart racer was inevitable. But where does it sit? Is it sat next to King Mario ripping pork leg with its teeth at the grand table, or is it being thrown grisly leftovers under the servants' quarters table like Shrek Swamp Kart Speedway? The answer, to me at least, is surprising, and after a series of either average or sometimes dreadful games, such as Carnival of Chaos on the Commodore 64, it's pleasing to end on the high note of a finely tuned engine. Muppets Racemania is good. Not okay or terrible, and no, not game-changingly terrific either, but it is pretty damn splendid. Traveller's Tales coded this for Sony for the good old PS1. You almost certainly will know Traveller's Tales very well from their time as the Lego game mine, worked to the bone as they popped out licensed Lego games like a bulbous, gassy factory pen pumping out golden eggs. And when compared with the Lego platformers, you can see a lot of similar brushstrokes in this earlier of works. There is a slavish amount of Muppet fan service on display in this game. Not only do you get an enormous roster of characters, mostly unlockable by bumping into them as they hang out in all sorts of strange nooks and indeed crannies of the courses, but they all have their own distinct cars, which, once you've got hold of them, can be mixed and matched with any of the racers. They don't really offer anything different in terms of speed or handling, but it's a neat aesthetic touch. So, as well as your expected racer like Fozzie, Kermit and Miss Piggy, you also get characters like Bobo the Bear, Link Hogthrob from Pigs in Space, Clifford from the 90s series reboot, and a Dozer, yes a Dozer, from that there Fraggle Rock, which also gets its own course later in the game. Being a child of the 80s, Fraggle Rock is obviously something that I will have a lot of time for. The courses are also steeped in the lore of Henson's wacky crew. They're largely based on all the major Muppet movies of the time, ranging from the debut, the Muppets movie, to the pretty dismal Muppets from Space, which came out a couple of years before this. But that also means that we do get courses from that seasonal favourite, Muppets Christmas Carol. They're introduced with a snippet of the movie that they're relevant to, but don't expect to see guest star humans like Michael Caine, Tim Curry or Hulk Hogan. Who cares about them anyway? You've got the damn Muppets. Mario Kart's battle mode is also part of this bulging package, taking place on the race courses but also in their own arenas, a bit like what's on offer in Mario Kart 8 on the Nintendo Switch. If that's not enough, there are also movie-specific courses that take the view to a bird's eye camera, and these actually play completely differently. These are designed like Kickstart or Trials, where you have to do a course in a particular way and perform particular stunts and tweak your speed and steering to clear certain obstacles. And this mode, along with all the others, can be played in 2 players. Now, I'm not too sure on this mode personally, as it doesn't have a quick reset and it isn't on a 2D gameplay plane, which makes it quite difficult to get through it. It is nice to have it though, and just shows just how much love Traveller's Tales had for this Muppets license, and how free they were for us to share it with them, the big swinging oafs, where's your pampas grass? The graphics are pretty good for a PlayStation 1 game, and though I'm not really that sold on the bobblehead inertia sway of the drivers, it does kind of fit with the silly races that are on offer. The music too is excellent, with Muppet-style goofy tunes performed by an orchestra, including a nice little reworking of the Muppets theme. I found myself humming some of them during the week of this production, so that shows they're pretty good. But there are some things that aren't quite right with this particular performance of the Muppets. The courses, designed as they are for many purposes, racing, shortcuts, battle modes, and to house secret characters, are often confusing to manoeuvre around, and quite often you can find yourself driving into a little corner and having difficulty course correcting yourself. The AI of the other racers will punish that, as there's none of your Mario Kart rubber banding here, but they're also quite inconsistent at times. For instance, on one of the Muppet Treasure Island courses, the entire chasing pack of Muppets just ploughed through the sea rather than race along the track, leaving me really quite lonely. They were still going the right way, I guess, but it wasn't really a shortcut as such, and it takes your opponents out of the race you're having for 70% of it, which isn't exactly the Mad Cup fun you'd want from a Muppets racing game. The control is not quite there either. You can see that they've tried to emulate the feel of Mario Kart 64 with how the drivers slide about, but Mario Kart 64 had the advantage on that it was running on the N64, complete as it was with an analogue stick. The PlayStation digital pad really doesn't translate the Mario 64 gameplay well at all. You'll get used to it, but it will mean a bit of a trade-off to the fluidity of the plumber's sofa more karting experience. But overall, this is a very good game, absolutely bursting with secrets and clearly a labour of love for Traveller's Tales. It is definitely a game I'll be coming back to play, and sadly that isn't something that I can say about any of the other games that I've played this month. I'm not playing as Pepe though. Pepe can go to hell. Reaction from the gaming press was a little bit mixed. IGN very much enjoyed it. They gave it a score of 83 in April 2000. They said, "It is very refreshing to see a big license turn into such a cool game. I insist that Jim Henson would not be twisting, turning and writhing in torment if he knew that this game existed. In fact, he'd probably want to crawl out of his grave and buy Muppet Racemania just so he can see how much fun his creations are to play with. It's obvious this is made for kids, but kart racing fans of all ages will fall in love if they give this a chance." CMVG were less sure of it when they reviewed it in April of the same year. They gave it a 2 out of 5 stars and said the allure of playing as Kermit and Co. is strong, but the gameplay is lacking, the controls sloppy and the courses too confusing. However, it looks great and has some funny scenes. But they're being a bunch of old Oscar the Grouches in my opinion. It's refreshing to see a licensed kart game work this well and have this much attention paid to it. Why, it's as rare as a Fozzie joke getting a laugh from Statler and Waldorf. A pleasant surprise indeed. In many respects, the Game Boy Advance is the right stage for the Muppets to shine, a marriage as pure as that of a frog to a pig. The machine, primarily aimed at the same age bracket as the furry fellas, was the perfect home for some on-the-go flocked-skinned mayhem with its colour palette and its open-door policy when it came to licensed properties. And there wasn't just one visit in the early 2000s by Kermit and crew to the hallowed halls of Nintendo handheld heaven, but 3, and that was on top of the GameCube and PlayStation 2 Muppets Party Cruise games. There sure was a lot of Muppet gamery going on in the early 2000s. Was this the Jim Henson Company's last attempt to make a quick buck before the House of Mouse absorbed them into its body in 2004, in the same manner they would later purge the souls of both Marvel and Lucasfilm? So yes, there were 3 Muppet games on the Game Boy Advance in extremely short order. Muppets Pinball Mayhem, The Muppets On With The Show, and Spy Muppets licensed to Croak. The first one released was Muppets Pinball Mayhem and was published via New Kid Co. We've encountered their fare before, courtesy of the absolute mountain of 2002 ET related titles, and also their Muppet-aligned Elmo and Grouchland movie tie-in. A game so brief that it could be last seen apologising that this had never happened before as it hurriedly rushed out of the room red-faced and pulling its trousers back on. Muppets Pinball Mayhem was programmed by Atari-derived industry codgers Digital Eclipse, and as you can see, it is pinball. How apt that with Kermit and all that we have a game with flippers, eh? The game features 4 different tables themed around a particular Muppet, with all the bumpers, hazards and multipliers that you could find on a pinball table of any grotty seaside pier arcade that you could care to mention. It's a straight-laced digital pinball game, a realistic recreation of a set of pinball tables that were never made. I'm not a fan of these types, in all honesty. I've always felt that if you've got the ability to do fantastical things that you couldn't do on a real table, why not indulge yourself a little? The sky's the limit, surely, with a digital pinball game, especially with a wacky licence like this. Imagine bashing Gonzo's chicken army with the ball as they lollop around the table, or transporting to a swamp-based mini-table on Kermit stage. I really want a Muppet variant on Naxat's Devil Crush, hog damn it. To judge the game in front of us, though, it is perfectly fine. It is a very solid version of digital pinball with excellent ball physics and some nice characteristic visuals. But unless you're as much of a pinball wizard as the deaf, dumb and blind kid that Roger Daltrey sung of in the 70s, you'll find it drier than a pork scratching from Miss Piggy's flank. And, well, you'll probably end up wanting to play something else instead after about an hour. Not for me then, but I think there is an audience for this kind of perfunctory pinball play. IGN, for instance, who reviewed it back at release, they did enjoy it. They gave it a 7.9 and said Digital Eclipse's pinball game, the first of many pinball games that will hit the Game Boy Advance in its lifetime, is a good, solid premiere for the handheld, with most of the pinball elements that real engineers threw into their machine design. The other two games were published by TDK, yes, them of the cheap videotapes, and apparently a rather wide range of licensed titles across the various formats. As well as the Muppets, you've got Star Trek, Shrek, the UFC, The Land Before Time, and Skittles. We will meet you again, you purveyors of blank cassettes, on another video on my channel. They handed coding duties to Vicarious Visions, who should need no introduction, but if they do, they're the boys responsible for the handheld versions of Tony Hawk's, various exports conversions of PC games, and the Guitar Hero on the DS. Good-o, a fine pedigree that. But how does it translate? Well, the Muppets on with the show and licensed to Croak were a little unusual given that they were given a dual release on the PC and the Game Boy Advance. I mean, that is an odd pairing, isn't it? Those two machines are not very similar. Let's look first at Spy Muppets licensed to Croak. And it starts off with this absolute banger. And you may well have figured out what this is. Yes, it's a Muppet-based Bond parody. Sam the Legal Eagle is the M to Kermit's Bond, with the other Muppets taking up roles of agents and villains with names like Dr. Nose and Piggy Galore. Agent Frog must capture the three supervillains and also an unknown superior crime lord, or crime lords, and my oh my, aren't Bunsen and Beaker acting a little bit strange in this game? I wonder why they keep asking us to bring them the villains' gadgets. So there follows a clutch of minigames per villain and lots of very on-point cheesy Muppet humour filling out the cutscenes. I'm sure you've been able to tell from the footage, but these aren't the most complicated of minigames. Each of the villains starts with Agent Frog in hot pursuit of the villain's henchman. Well, that is after the still very behaviourally suspect Bunsen and Beaker leave you to build your own vehicle in a silhouette matching task. Once that's done, you've got to keep pace with the wrong-uns, dodging their obstructions and obstacles. After that, the encounters at the villain's HQ, they vary up a little, but it's all very Newgrounds level of flash game style entertainment here. Should you wish, there are different skill levels to inflate what is a pretty lightweight playtime. Not the best Muppets game this, and I've not been able to find a review from the time, but I can tell you that it does manage to capture the Muppets comedy quite well. And, of course, that Bond parody music at the beginning is always guaranteed to raise a smile. The final game, though, is more of the same, albeit in a more traditional setting, for the wacky troupe of furry puppets. They're treading the boards, just like they do on that there the telly. Here, we're in a typically chaotic episode of the show which Kermit the Frog is struggling to keep in order. Each minigame is a skit complete with Statler and Waldorf blithely berating it. I still can't work out why these moaning bastards don't just go and do something else. Anyway, it is a very, very similar game to License to Croak. We've got another collection of fairly simple mini-games, with Gonzo's stunt exploits on a motorbike feeling extremely similar to the vehicle-based sections in Kermit's Spy Caper. Of course, the nature of these mini-games fits in very well with the theme of the show, and each scene is delivered at the same breakneck pace of the TV show. But that's just one show, and that's how long this game lasts. This game lasts half an hour. That's not brilliant for a £30 game. For some reason, it even has passwords if committing to half an hour of play is too much for you. On With the Show at least rewards you with extra games on the higher difficulty levels and allows you to access any of the games individually from the main menu, something that License to Croak did not do. IGN did a review of this one. They gave it a 7 out of 10 in March 2003 and said there's no question that the game design in On With the Show is aimed at the younger gaming crowd, since the challenges are extremely basic and offer little challenge for the experienced gamer. Honestly, this one is just for kids. It's a decent one for their group, it just will not be for the die-hard Game Boy gamer. Thanks IGN. For me, even though I'm not a fan of the rather straight-laced pinball stylings, that game is the best out of the three, as it does at least give you a smidgen of longevity if you can put up with how boring it is. The other two don't deserve a Miss Piggy karate chop, they're okay, but perhaps a sardonic dress down by Statler and Waldorf will learn them up good. Now, I could start this video with my embarrassingly shrieky and pretty bad impersonation of Elmo, but I know that will tank the viewer retention stats because, well, dear sweet Elmo does have one of those voices that's appealing to the under fives and rancid bin juice to the ears of just about everybody else. Yet this has proved to be little impediment to his success, hasn't it? He's the undoubted star of Sesame Street despite joining its cast nearly a decade into its run. Starting out as a background character, he manoeuvred his way to the foreground and ultimately the spotlight. It's like a furry version of Game of Thrones, though there's no indication that Elmo has either slept or murdered his way to the top of the stairs next to the Snuffleupagus. Yet. That may come out. We all know of the incredible 1996 demand for Tickle Me Elmo, which saw people reenact scenes from Jingle All the Way in their local Toys R Us. These days, though, Tickle Me Elmos are so plentiful they're being electro-shock therapied by internet wags with hilarious results. Being an incredibly famous celebrity, it was almost inevitable we would hear stories of a carnal nature attached to the red-flocked romp room roustabout, as his original puppeteer had to resign after some unproven allegations of improper conduct with minors came to light. And by minors, I don't mean those guys down in the mines. Statute of limitations expired. The puppeteer in question, Mr. Kevin Clash, is now putting his fist back up. Puppets. Yes. The 90s popularity of the character was huge enough for the Jim Henson Company to point the little fella's orange honker towards the Hollywood sign, to which he bounded towards with the sort of youthful energy that my frame forgot too long ago. I'm very old. The movie that came out of this escapade was called The Adventures of Elmo in Grouchland, and that was released upon the American viewing public in October 1999. After a series of mishaps, Elmo's beloved blanket ends up in the possession of Oscar the Grouch, who treats it like a tissue, and so Projectile shoots a load of sticky body waste all over it and throws it in the trash. No, not that, obviously, though that is where I directed your hips for my own crass self-abasement. The blanket is then thrown below Oscar's feet into the mysterious otherworld of his dustbin. Now, Oscar's bin was something that fascinated me growing up, There was a lot going on in there. You would hear Oscar potter off down some stairs, rifle through cabinets. It was a well of impossible space. Now, thanks to Elmo, we actually get to find out what was going on in there as the plucky puppet descends into the tin trash depository to recover his blanket. Being a vast pocket universe, Elmo doesn't emerge for a few hours, meaning his absence is noted by key members of the Sesame Street cast who duly follow him there to Grouchland. Not Bert and Ernie, though, who remain holed up in their flat like the evident agoraphobic homosexual couple that they probably are. Adventures in Grouchland was the second movie to be based on the characters of Sesame Street after 1985's Follow That Bird. It was the last puppeting performance of Frank Oz before he hung up the glove puppets. The film received generally positive reviews from the critics, currently sitting pretty on review aggregator Rotten Tomatoes with a freshness score of 77. That's not too bad. Despite this and Elmo's popularity, it was a box office stinker, grossing $12 million against a budget of more than $26 million. This was before the acquisition by Disney, so Sony were distributing the movie worldwide, and they withdrew a chunk of the marketing budget just before it was to be released that largely crippled it. As a result, it's now left as the poorest performing Muppet-based movie in history. Elmo is sad because he was in a turkey, like a lonely pervert, on Christmas Day. Yeah, that's the Elmo impression. Sorry about that. I probably will do it again, though. Two related games came out the same month as the release of the movie. An interactive edutainment title on the PC that was published by Mattel, and the game we're covering today, the eponymously titled The Adventures of Elmo in Grouchland, that came out in the Game Boy Color. I'm not going to carry on the review by calling it The Adventures of Elmo in Grouchland, though, because that's too long a title. How does the acronym work? TAILEG. Oh, no, that doesn't work either. Okay, let's just call it Grouchland, that'll do. Grouchland was published by Ubisoft's kids arm, New Kid Co., who you may remember as the house behind the absolute splurge of E.T. related titles in 2002 that no one ever talks about. It was coded by Bonsai, who also made a further 2 Elmo related titles in 1999, both of which look suspiciously more educational to me, so let's not talk about them at all. Thank you very much. Bye, Felicia. Grouchland is far more exciting as it's a platform game, which is a much more preferable genre, thank you very much. 8 levels stand between your digital avatar puppet and blanket grasping glory, 6 of which are traditional platforming fare, with a bit of variety thrown up by level 2's junk avoiding plummet into Grouchland, and level 6 is minecart stage. Minecart stages and platform games, they're practically married at this stage, aren't they? The Bert and Ernie of gaming conventions. Elmo is a little slippery to control and doesn't have much in the way of attacks. Remember, he's a baby Muppet. He's got hands like pillows. He's not going to be much good in a fight. So instead, you'll be doing a lot of hazard avoidance for the most part. Though in level 3, you do push away Muppet damaging fart gas clouds with a fan. And in the middle of the game, you'll be battling film villain Huxley's helicopter with the water from a hydrant. Graphically, it's fine. The backgrounds, animation and sprite work do a good job, but nothing that will make a small child holler with glee. Now, on to the elephant in the room, or the snuffleupagus in the room if you prefer. The footage I'm currently playing is the last 2 levels of the 8, unedited and in their entirety. Just watch this. Yes, that was a quarter of this entire game. This video is the entirety of the game footage, including the menu screens and the closing scenes. That is just over 10 minutes. And this was me selecting it on hard on my first go. Yes, I know it's aimed at smaller children, but still, make it easy, but at least give it something resembling some sort of length. The game is marginally longer than World 1 in Super Mario Bros. And massively easier. They've taken time to draw all these fresh background graphics per levels for stages that last about 30 seconds. So embellish it, make it bigger. Elmo is on a fantastical journey through a silly world of grumps, not on a trip to the local newsagents for a copy of Carp Weekly and a bag of Starburst. The game has a runtime a 13th as long as the movie. Shouldn't it be the other way around with game adaptations? Surely. And no, there's not even any mini-games, which are the usual filler they put in kids' titles. This was £30 at launch. At 10 minutes runtime, that's £3 a minute. Elmo has been mugged! Can you spell mugged? M-U-G-G-E-D. That spells mugged! I'm bleeding out! Yeah, sorry about that again. There can only be two reasons for the length of this. Either New Kid Co were being lolly-snatching grifters who wanted to put in the bare minimum of work, or development support was diverted after they discovered Sony planned to pull back on marketing to the movie prior to its release. If this was the reason, it's a pretty bad one. Elmo is a big enough draw on his own terms, and if the game is given good enough praise and word of mouth, it could have stood on its own with the movie just being background noise, couldn't it? Surely. I couldn't really find anything in the way of reviews, which adds credence to the argument that the whole Adventures of Elmo and Grouchland marketing push was extended across the whole of its merchandising. And also, well, I can't see the press at the time being that impressed with this anemic package that's on offer to them. So there you go then. This review is officially longer than the entire game. So just like our eponymous hero, this experience has made me feel like I've been to Grouchland. Elmo is glad he has his blanket because he's going to bed for being such a bad boy. Yeah, that impression got worse as it went on, didn't it? Sorry about that. Anyway, thanks for joining me on this retrospective on the video games of the Muppets. There will be more videos about the Muppets and their video games in March during the Muppet March Madness series. Are you excited for that as I am? Probably not. And I'm pretty dour about it as well. Anyway, like, subscribe, and Kay, thanks, bye.
Thank you for joining Jay's Manchild and myself, Kermit the Frog. Yeah!